So Jamie and Helen, Jamie's my cousin and Helen's his wife, and we were all close friends. And their first baby was born and he was really small. He was only 2 kilos. Helen's a doctor and a hospital consultant, and she really wanted to breastfeed, and she knew, particularly with a small baby, it was so important. And she would weigh the baby, breastfeed the baby, and then re-weigh the baby. This is the current existing standard, and Helen knew this is a nonsense because typically these scales are not accurate. They were looking for a product that could tell them how much breast milk their own baby was getting, and they were stunned that none existed. Jamie, he spent 2 years developing that technology, and he filed a patent. It's at that point we decided, okay, now's our chance. Are we going to do it? Yes. The World Health Organization and medical professionals, they want women to exclusively breastfeed to 6 months. And this is because of the enormous health benefits of breastfeeding to babies, mother and society. Only 13% of mothers in Europe reach this exclusive 6-month target. Whoa. There's lots of reasons women stop breastfeeding, but number one is concern regarding low supply. So women not knowing if their baby's getting enough milk, they become uncertain and they stop and they start to supplement with formula. You can imagine for a mother that formula feeds her baby, she can see exactly how much milk the baby gets. But for breastfeeding mothers, this reassurance does not exist.
So tell us about a setback that you actually turned into a positive.
It was really about, that's what every startup faces. It's always...
Rosanne, something about you as well, that you swim, right? So is there something about your competitive nature, that ability to go through the walls, right, that has helped you on this journey? Rosanne, welcome to the pod. I was really looking forward to this one, right? It's a morning in Dublin. How are things with you?
Things are great. I'm delighted to be here, Jesus. We've known each other a long time, 6 years ago from our day one. So yeah, it's lovely. It's still very dark. I'm here at the kitchen table, but it feels like a nighttime podcast, but I'm sure it'll brighten up soon.
Yeah, I have to work on the lighting as well here, on my side, right?
Yeah.
It's one of those things. Island is tricky. It's tricky for the lights.
Well, I've never done a podcast in the winter. So before, the light is usually streaming in the summer. It didn't even dawn on me. So I've got a few lamps set up around me here, some table lights. So, but yeah, look, it'll get better.
So let's jump straight into it, Rosanne. Basically, what we do here is like just to get to understand the person, the entrepreneur, right? So your background is actually very interesting because you are from financial services and you moved in to build Coro in the actual, let's say, the health tech space, right? So tell us a bit about that and your background, and then let's deep dive into Coro a bit as well, right?
Well, I had a very traditional kind of education in terms of the Irish experience. I did my leaving certificate and I went off to university, and I did a degree in public administration, which is actually geared towards for people really who want to go into the public sector, into the civil service. So I did that, and then I went into the civil service for 6 months and quickly realized it just wasn't going to be the career for me. And then I moved into financial services. So, it was great. Like, I would say I was a very strong generalist, really, I did some basic accounting technician exams. I did a postgraduate diploma in project management. I did my qualified financial advisor exams. So I was always kind of moving, but I guess my favorite part of work was moving around the business. So I worked in a number of different departments. Primarily in my last roles, I had been, in front of clients. And then I moved into back office where I led kind of those back office support and operational teams. So yeah, jack of all trades, master of none. And that's typically not a good thing in finance. But the companies I worked for, they were very dynamic, and, like, for example, if they acquired another company, they would send me off as part of the project management team to review all those processes and how would we fold those businesses back into the acquiring business. So I got to move around quite a lot for a kind of a traditional industry, like within the business. But I guess, like, in terms of like the startup space and like, entrepreneurs, really came around when I was dealing with high net worth clients. And I loved meeting the men and women who had created their own businesses. And, they were wealthy because they had built their businesses from scratch, and how those businesses started, like the genesis, their journey. And I was always a bit fascinated with Shark Tank and Dragon's Den, and the whole building and scaling thing was really fascinating. So yeah, that's my background before Coro. And then Coro came about very organically. It was actually my CTO and the two founders, Jamie and Helen, They had this problem that Coro is addressing with their first baby. And I am Jamie's cousin. And so we just together kind of along the journey said, right, we've got a good team here and we'll go for it.
I'm taking notes as I go, right? Because just make sure I don't forget, because there's always a lot of insights, Rosanne. So one of the things I wanted to ask you is that journey with Jamie, right? That's why I noted down here, family, right? Because sometimes people will say, okay, how does it work actually building a business from the ground up, family, right? Maybe we can start unpacking that before we deep dive into Coro itself,
okay.
the product.
Okay, so basically I'll give you the outline of the problem, and then because it's the story, so it's hard to explain it without that. So Jamie and Helen, Jamie's my cousin and Helen's his wife, and we were all close friends. And their first baby was born, and he was really small. He was full term, but he was only 2 kilos, 2.2 kilos full term, so tiny. And Helen really wanted to, Helen's a doctor and a hospital consultant, and she really wanted to breastfeed. And she knew, particularly with a small baby, it was so important. And it was their experience of the public health nurse coming out to the kitchen table and putting this weighing scales on the table. She would breastfeed the baby, Helen, and they would weigh the baby and then, weigh the baby, breastfeed the baby, and then re-weigh the baby. And this is the current existing standard. And Helen knew this is a nonsense. It's no longer recommended because typically these scales are not accurate. They're not motion compensated. You're moving a weighing object. So Jamie and Helen looked to the market. They were looking for a product that could tell them how much breast milk their own baby was getting. And they were stunned that none existed. So coincidentally, Jamie is an electronics engineer and was working in the area of microflow sensing in another industry. And he started to examine the patent art that existed. And he could see that a number of companies were trying to solve this problem. And they were trying to solve the problem around the silicone nipple shield. So this was a known solution, but nobody was able to fit the technology into that form. So he spent 2 years developing that technology, and he filed the patent. So he had been working very hard on that for 2 years. Helen, in the meantime, was looking at the kind of academic and medical piece, like the size of the market, just in her world, and like all of the research around breastfeeding rates, why women start, why women stop. And I was always there with them on that journey, just by sheer fact that we are family and we are friends. And because of my access to high net worth investors, when the patent granted after 2 years and we kind of had that base, that background work done, it's at that point we decided, okay, well, look, this is, now's our chance. Are we going to do it? Yes. And have we a good team between the medical background, the engineering, and then the finance / project management? And we just decided, yeah, this is a great team. And it was very organic. And I have to say, it was probably the biggest surprise to us. It was so natural how it worked for us. But when we went out to pitch to investors for our seed round particularly, but even to this day, all the investors always comment on that diversity of expertise and experience in the team.
Yes.
I always say to other startups I meet, don't underestimate that actually. When people say they look at the team, they do look at the qualifications of the people on the team, but actually it's having those different areas of expertise. So not all coders, not all software developers. Like you do need people to wear different hats, especially when you're very small and you have to cover a lot of areas. So yeah, very important.
You did right, Rosanne, the complementary skills. And you guys, you said you have the finance, you have the tech, and you have also the research, right? Which is fantastic from the get-go as a team to starting off. And 2 years in research, actually looking at the silicone, right? How is it going to work? Tell us a bit about that journey, because I know you didn't start at the 2 years, Rosanne. Then you moved on a bit as well, the hardware.
Yeah, so basically, as I said, the World Health Organization and medical professionals, they want women to exclusively breastfeed to 6 months. And this is because of the enormous health benefits of breastfeeding to babies, mother and society. And there's over 2,000 independent studies, medical studies on the benefits of breastfeeding and what it does for moms and babies. So everyone seems to be aware of the benefits. But what happens is when you look at the reasons why women are stopping, so if you look at the rates in Europe, only 13% of mothers in Europe reach this exclusive 6-month target. It's about 19, wow. It's about 19% of mothers in the US, about 26% in China. So we're saying, why are women stopping? And you look at all of the reasons for premature cessation. The main reason globally is concern regarding low supply. So there's lots of reasons women stop breastfeeding, but number one is concern regarding low supply. So women not knowing if their baby's getting enough milk. So they become uncertain and they stop and they start to supplement with formula. So you can imagine for a mother that formula feeds her baby, she can see exactly how much milk the baby gets. But for breastfeeding mothers, this reassurance does not exist. So this is, I said, a very well-known problem, critically felt, and the solution was always known. So this is
there
Coro.
You go, the magic.
Yay! So this is Coro. And basically these silicone nipple shields, this was the known solution. Their accessibility and tolerability is extremely high. About 98% of medical professionals recommend their use. So these are currently like the passive ones. This silicone are €10 in any pharmacy. And they are used for skin protection for women who have issues with oversupply and maybe women with inverted nipples. So again, very tolerated and, very widely available. So this was the kind of the tech race, was to get the patented microflow sensor in here. So it's the same form as a standard shield. So you're thinking of the minimum barrier between mother and baby and as close to skin contact, as you can get. And essentially we were the first company in the world to patent that flow sensor. So the mother simply wears this like a regular shield, like she's breastfeeding any other shield. And as she feeds her baby, all of the data comes up on the app on her phone in real time. So she can see exactly how much milk her baby is getting. And then it's simply washed in warm soapy water because there is no bad bacteria in breast milk. And it's placed here to charge. So you're charging it, it's left to air dry, and that's the charging port. And
very sleek, very sleek.
And then she can pop it in her handbag.
That's such a beautiful solution, isn't it? And then it gives the mother reassurance as well, right? But Rosanne, let's unpack, because it made it look very simple, right? We just looked at this problem, we looked at the silicone, we looked at the technologies, boom, and we just put it together, right?
Boom, 8 years later.
Tell us some of the, the journeys, like the highs, the lows, while you guys went to China to figure out this as well, the supply chain. Unpack a bit of that for the listeners.
Okay, so we have Jamie and Helen doing their 2 years, the foundation work. And when Jamie filed the patent and that granted in 2017, that's when we said, okay, now we quit our jobs. So, we have, we're obviously slightly older than some other entrepreneurs and have mortgages and families. So I think we would have de-risked the proposition as much as we can. Yes. And by 2017, once the patent granted, we knew we had something special. So we raised a seed round and we raised 900,000. And as I said, it's these proof points and milestones we always have to work towards. And that 900,000 was, first of all, Enterprise Ireland came in on that for 250,000. And that was to bring the patent on a piece of paper through to a working prototype. So we didn't have a working prototype. So we spent 2 years working at that. And what we realized that by 2019 was that how are we going to scale this company globally, and how would we do it rapidly? And we knew the only way to do that is if we had medical professionals recommending our product and recommending Coro. And, Coro being the gold standard tool in breast milk measurement, because there is a lot of gimmicks out there. So we knew in order to have medical professionals to, evangelize the product on our behalf and to, recommend it to mothers, it needed to be tested clinically in a clinical trial that was paid for by the European taxpayer, completely independent, and have the rigor of a clinical trial and the medical community backing it. So we had a working prototype and we went to the European Commission and we applied for Horizon 2020 funding for that clinical trial. Yes. And we were awarded that 2.1 million euros in 2019. And that was to allow us to carry out this trial in one of the largest maternity hospitals in Europe, and also to build up the production capacity, because as I mentioned, production of hardware is expensive, tooling, molding, suppliers, supply chain, the materials, there is a lot of components. And, it's just an expensive business. So luckily for us, Europe and the European Commission could see the benefit, the health benefits for mothers, for babies, and for society. And this is really a global problem. And it really was a truly innovative product. And it was clearly defensible in terms of our deep patent portfolio. So they backed us, and we were very lucky at that point, because had we tried to raise again, without like either selling the product in the market or the validation, I don't know, could we have raised easily at all with private or venture. So
yes.
The European Commission kind of bridging that gap for the really disruptive technologies, like that kind of grant funding for particular businesses is so important to bridge that gap. So then we obviously then the clinical trial happened, and then COVID happened, and nothing really happened then for 2 years. So look, we were all the time building, adding value, testing materials. I think people, when they hold Coro in their hands and they see the product, they're like, wow, that's so nice. Simple. It's so beautiful. It's simple, and it's so easy to use. It's very clean. It's very elegant. But it's amazing the amount of work that comes with a simple product, like that kind of simplicity. And really, I guess for us, like, people are saying, what was going on those 4 years, but really this product is a feat of engineering in and of itself, and of material science. So I often say to people, like, there's a piece of material, nylon, that runs down through here to make it really malleable for the mother and baby. And there's actually 20,000 different types of nylon in the world. And in terms of silicone, the beauty of silicone is that nothing wants to adhere to it. So even finding a manufacturer who could work with us with this type of material, and to the rigor of a medical classification in terms of materials and all of the testing around this before it goes into a baby's mouth, it's a very, very high standard. So even finding that manufacturer to partner with us took nearly 2.5, 3 years to find them.
Because there's a lot of things you guys actually have to sort out, right? Coming back to the materials, the supply chain, the distribution. Before we unpack a bit more that, Rosanne, a lot of people actually looking at that Horizon 2020 funding, right? What has been your experience there? I know for you guys was like a bit of a lifeline validation, but how has it been working through that fund?
Yeah, look, we think it was great for us. I mean, they were extremely supportive. So typically, the funding is for a 2-year project. And because COVID happened, obviously everything, was just thrown into the air, essentially, in terms of we weren't allowed to supply the product into a hospital during COVID. And look, the European Commission just gave us their full support. They extended the project. They really wanted this product to work. They understood the mission, and they understood the value this will bring to society in terms of health populations and helping women achieve their own breastfeeding goals. So I have to say we've had a really blessed journey with them. They've been fully supportive. Obviously, when it comes to grant funding, there is that rigor of exceptional kind of levels of record keeping and accounting, because it is European taxpayers' money and you're held to the highest standard. So I would say there is definitely a time and a resource requirement when you accept grant funding, because your reporting levels and your reporting, the audit level is so high, because, as I said, it's this, you have to account for everything. So I would say there's a time and resource, investment required by the team. But other than that, in terms of how they manage it, their support for us, I feel it's been exceptional, and it was certainly our lifeline. We would not be here at this point today. So we're currently closing our Series A. But had we not got that money to bridge the technology gap in the middle, we certainly would not be raising the Series A. As I said, we're pre-revenue. We launch to the market next year. So again, we're in a very different space where we are pre-revenue. We haven't sold Coro yet, and we're on our Series A. So that's hard for investors to understand. But when they understand the deep production and clinical piece and already the funding behind us, then they understand. It's just a slightly different business model to most other companies you meet.
It's interesting you mentioned that because, Rosanne, one of the things that people say is that the level of documentation when you're dealing with the Horizon 2020 fund, it could be cumbersome in a way, is a work on its own, right?
Yeah. I mean, it is. And like, that's the trade-off, right? Because it's essentially non-dilute, like ours was non-dilutive grant funding. So that's very, very rare. And, but yeah, 100%, there is that bureaucratic investment required. But I think for what I say to most companies, look, just do it right from the beginning. Don't leave it till the end. And but I have to say, other than that, which we fully expected and anticipated, and it was well flagged to us, even like, I think if you get through the application process, you are very aware of what's coming down the track in terms of that.
Milestones.
So yeah, it's sometimes the application process is enough to put some people off. Then yeah, it's definitely not for them.
And on the product, the Coro, right, Rosanne, one of the things is, of course, it's very hard to make something simple, right? And you guys went on the journey of making this product simple and beautiful and elegant, particularly because you're dealing with women. So it has to be elegant, very aesthetically pleasing, right? And that is a journey on its own, to actually make something very, very simple. But I want to unpack what you mentioned about dealing with investors, because your product not only is a software product, it's also a hardware product. So when you initially started pitching this to investors, tell us, some of those stories and how they perceived the joy that could be, right? Because hardware is hard to build, and you're doing both.
Yeah, to be honest, I think when 2017, like when you and me were down in Dogpatch Labs, and we were the only hardware product in the space at the time. So we were a very rare breed. Hardware had become extremely unsexy, like particularly out of the States. Nobody was really doing it. But it was around a time where everybody was raising money for crypto and blockchain. And nowadays it's AI and machine learning. And investors are like, what does that mean? Like, the profile of the investor at the time for us in Ireland was a slightly older, wealthy man. And, so they, these new technologies and sciences and concepts particularly are hard to understand. And what's particularly hard for the investor to understand is, even if they understand the concept of the problem it solves, they can't understand how they're going to make money. And like, that's what investors want to know. They want to know, what is the return on my investment? When am I making money, and when am I getting my money back? So we were, fundraising is always hard, but we were in a really privileged position in that the problem we're solving is very easy to explain. It was very straightforward for the investor to go out and do their own market research and see, is there anything on the market? Walk into ask a doctor, ask a midwife, ask a nurse, and walk into a pharmacy chain and see there's nothing there. So that was very straightforward for them. And also what was straightforward for them with hardware was the business model. Like, they understand it's made and then it's sold, it's made for X, you sell it for Y. And all of that subscription model is taken out of it. And then all of those complex commercial models of how the company will make money and how it will become revenue generating and profitable. So in that respect, it wasn't difficult for me to explain Coro to investors, and it wasn't difficult for them to understand. So yeah, I would say that it always landed very positively. And I think there was only 2 people who didn't really get it. I think I can remember the only 2 people who were like, oh, is that really is that really a big deal? Do women really care about that? But again, for people who don't understand, they just have to go home and ask their mother, their sister, their friend. It's, even if you haven't had the experience of having a baby or breastfeeding, you can go out and find out pretty easily how big this problem is and how compelling the investment proposition is.
So you say there was a high level of appetite as well within the Irish community and outside of the Irish community, investment community. You went to act for hardware products. Or would you say it was kind of like, okay, I need to bring my A game and pitch it really, really top so they can see clearly that it's going to take a bit more time. It might take a bit more costs actually to bring it to market. But there's big opportunity here we're going after.
Yeah, look, it's never easy to raise money, and it's not easy in hardware. And the funny thing is, we're in a space where we're actually consumer product. Even though we have this clinical validation, Coro is a consumer product, and you'll see a lot of the hardware typically in Ireland, especially, typically falls into medtech. And when you talk to the traditional medtech investor, they understand the regulation around it, the testing, the rigor of all that, but they are terrified of consumer product. That is not their space, because there's sections of the Irish economy that are just like absolutely killing it in medical device, and and what the work they do out of BioInnovate in Galway. But we're a very different product because it's consumer with all that as well, with that health data. So it was hard to raise, and obviously we did not think it was going to take this long. The technology issues we ran into in 2019, we did not foresee those, and they took a couple of years to iron out. And luckily we had that European grant funding. But I think investors like to be de-risked. So look, we had a really good team. We had a patent, so we had that patent defensibility. And then they knew we would qualify. Like, we were pretty sure, because of the benefits of breastfeeding, and if we could prove this, that we would potentially be very strong candidate for qualifying for grant funding. So even for the seed pitch, and when we went out to them, we were like, look, we're hitting all of these targets. We cover off a lot of this area in terms of even this, breastfeeding, what that means for health populations, and what that data can do in terms of future academic and medical research. So there's a very good feel-good factor for the investors in Coro. But yeah, look, it's always hard to raise money, and hardware it's a very long stretch to the market. So they typically don't like that. And then, as I said, those milestones, those proof points, it's expensive to get to them, because you have to build machinery, build tooling, users, using it. The product has to be safe, CE marked, everything has to be ready to go before you can even have one user use it. So in that regard to software, we're so different. It's far more expensive and a longer journey.
And talk to me a bit about the distribution model, because you talked a bit about it there. You guys were like pretty potentially consumer product. You're saying we're not medical, but we can guide us, because it's let's say a line that you have to navigate, right? So Rosanne, where do you guys land at the end with Coro?
Yeah, so look, about 6 years ago when we started, every mother wanted to go into a big pharmacy chain and buy Coro over the counter. And that was, we were like examining that business model. Look, that was the route to market. That's where everybody went. But it was very expensive, that's an expensive, with the distributor in the middle. And then you've got the retailer taking their fairly significant chunk off the top. So we were really surprised, actually, when we were modeling the numbers for that route. But we accepted it, and that's where women wanted to purchase the product. And still some women will. But I'm not sure if it's the younger generations coming up, and also COVID radically kind of changed consumer purchasing behavior, particularly in this space that we're in. In America, it's known as baby tech. So
baby tech, all right.
Baby tech, yeah, it's a whole market. So women are buying online. They're going onto web e-commerce platforms, and they're buying, and they have no problem purchasing this type of product there. They're getting their content there, they're getting their information there. And then they're just simply going online and buying. So when we look at other baby tech products, they have their shop front online, and they don't sell in store. They might sell in one or two, but the model of being in every pharmacy chain all across Ireland and Europe and the US, it's just not done anymore. There might be some very kind of bespoke or specialized shops that you want to kind of have like your flagship, if a mother wants to go in and pick up the silicone and touch and feel it. But even those, that research shows that they do that, and they'll still go home and purchase online.
Exactly.
So we've really moved for our, we will launch in store in Ireland. But after that, we're looking really at a direct consumer model, online only.
No, you said it there, Rosanne. Even like with clothes these days, you kind of go to the shop, you try it, and then you're like, let me just order a because I want a fresh, fresh bread, right? So
yeah.
Let's switch some gears a bit, Rosanne. I want to understand as well, because the journey has been long in a way, right? A lot of, let's say, ups and downs, right? So tell us about a setback that you actually turned into a positive, right? I know COVID was a tough time. You can talk about the COVID period or outside COVID as well.
So I'd say COVID probably, that was tough in terms of our clinical trial had to stop, be paused. And then obviously supply chain was an absolute mess. So the European Commission were saying like, look, we had different aspects to the project. Like we had a lot of work to do. It's not that we didn't have anything. And luckily we were designated R&D analytics. So our lab was able to remain open and our engineers could go to work. And I obviously, as desk-based, I stayed home. So we were able to continue working and we had so much work to do. It didn't stop us completely. But the work we had planned and we could have probably covered in that time was very much disrupted by the supply chain and sensors and batteries and everything. So that was particularly difficult. But in that time, we were testing Coro in the clinical space and the accuracy wasn't perfect, but we were recording this pulsating sequence of how babies feed. And that, in fact, had never been recorded before. So even though when we were testing for volume in the very early days in the trial and we were trying to finesse that calibration, we were all the time gathering data. And that was magic for the doctors and it was magic for the European Commission because this data of how babies suck and how hard they suck, that had never been seen before. And the clinical team were able to go over and disseminate that to the biggest PEDS association conference in the US. And that was novel. And, that is going to have a lot of impact in other areas of breastfeeding research. So although it was very hard, like we were wondering, could we ever get this volume to be accurate enough? We were always adding value, always hitting these other milestones. And we really knew that we were getting there. Like it was really tough, but we were getting there. And it was really about trying to get to the problem, get it solved before we ran out of cash. And like, that's what every startup faces. It's always, we always find like somebody is going to do this technology will be solved one day. But can you stay in the game long enough with cash to be there solving the problem? So sometimes you just run out of money and, eventually if you had a bit more runway, you could do it. But yeah, that's kind of the position we were in, that we got there just in time.
And you mentioned the grit, the resilience, the purpose and the mission, to be honest, kind of gets you going in the morning every single time, Rosanne. But you said like was it the cash? There was a time that you guys looked at the cash balance. You guys, we have a couple of more months left in this. And then how you guys rethought about actually optimizing that cash levels, or there was another like value of that moment and you turned that around. You say, okay, this is the new path to go, right? Because it's one of those things that there's always those pivotal moments in any business that a business has to make a critical decision. Can you share one of those with us?
Yeah, look, I think we always knew that this was going to be an expensive project. So before we raised our seed round, the founding team had their 6 months sweat equity. So we didn't pay ourselves to get the product to a point where we had patent defensibility and we had, we knew at least we had the feasibility grant from Enterprise Ireland. And, we'd kind of gotten as much, we were as far as we could in the journey at the very beginning. And then at that point, Jamie and I, CTO, and Helen, who's our chief research officer on the medical clinical side, I guess what we looked at, we just did a huge amount of research around the American model of like raising big, raising huge amounts of money and go big, go hard, and go home. Go home very quickly. And we decided we would take the completely opposite approach, maybe the more European mindset. And we ran a very, very lean and frugal business from the beginning. So we always shopped around for a very competitive lab and office space. So luckily, thank God, right, in DCU Alpha, where they have a core focus on hardware sensing technology. So we're not me now, but the rest of the team are in amongst their own with a lot of these engineer and expertise out there. And then we always ran the business really lean. We, our engineers are paid more than the founders, obviously. And then we have a very straightforward, very small office, a purpose-built lab. We were never extravagant, like there's no business class flights, there's no, big conferences, there's no like we ran it very, very lean. Like I think most people, when they see our burn rate, were gobsmacked at how, and the core team was 4.5 people. So for 6 years, we've been four people full time, and Helen is with us 2 days a week. So, yeah, we like obviously cash is always an issue, but had we run out of cash, I don't think we could have done it any leaner, because we really did, you know, I'm pretty much known in town, I'm sure around Dublin, for never paying for anything. And like going to all of the Amazon drinks and all of when the big companies have their startup get-togethers and all that kind of thing. Yeah, like as an entrepreneur, like you don't have the luxury of that kind of expendable cash on that kind of marketing and parties and that kind of thing. So yeah, there's definitely a group of us that kind of definitely we're the European model. We're really cheap and lean and frugal. Which investors love, by the way. I have to say that.
It could be still your wealth management background, right, Rosanne, right? I think there's a tagline here: stay lean, stay frugal, stay the course, right? So, something like that.
Yeah, and it's really funny because I think sometimes when investors come out, I think people, like there is the whole PR side of you have to look like you're doing super successful and that everything is working, and everyone in startup and who's listening to this will know that that is not the case.
No, it's not the case, no.
Like LinkedIn is just, you know, it's not real life. I meet people and they're like, you are smashing it, you know, and this could have even been at one of our lowest ebbs because of a LinkedIn post that that you put up. But I have to say, when investors come out and they're looking at the business and they see how your managed accounts and they see how your premises, I always think they're surprised when they come out and see like where we are and how, you know, our little coffee machine in the corner and 4 people working away really quietly. And, you know, they are impressed by that.
Well, Rosanne, something about you as well, that when you're talking about the stay lean, stay frugal, go the course, right? You swim, right? So is there something about your competitive nature as well, right? That ability to go through the walls, right? That has helped you on this journey, Rosanne?
There's a lot, yeah, because and most people don't know that I used to swim, but I think they know now because I won the Liffey this year.
Yeah,
and I put it up on LinkedIn because I was laughing to you saying all of these venture capital dinners or all these events, they always have like a ex-rugby player, ex-GA player up on stage at the end for the after dinner speech talking about, you know, the similarities between startup and business and sport. And I'm always like, really, you know, the resilience piece, the teamwork, the modesty. So yeah, I posted up when I won the Liffey this year. In terms of swimming, maybe, I mean, our core team has always been very tight, but I never played team sports. Swimming is a very solitary sport. You kind of depend on yourself. Maybe there are elements of that feed into being able to kind of go out all the time on your own, travel, raise money, go to meetings. We typically, as a team, I would always pitch the meetings myself, and it's only if it gets to a very kind of further along stage where the investor wants to come in and meet the CTO, but we don't typically do that together because we've kept the core team so small. So I try to just take all of the noise away from the engineers and the scientists, and then I do everything, you know, and just make sure there's enough money for them to do their job. We don't try, you know, because the team is so small, we don't tend to bleed into each other's areas. And that's always worked for us. So yeah, I do basically out all the time, like on my own. And maybe swimming has something to do with that. I don't know.
Because Rosanne, I always believe that this is a mindset game as well, right? So how you keep your mental capacity going is absolutely key. And as you said as well, you taking all that burden on yourself and, you know, dealing with certain negatives and not passing that energy to the team is so vital, right? It's a lonely journey as a CEO at times, right? Because you cannot reveal every single thing. You have to keep the energy. You have to keep the team going, keep the team motivated, right? So that's why I believe that even like what you mentioned, the single sports are actually vital because you're on your own zone, on your own lane, executing, breaking walls as you go. So I thought it was very interesting when you posted that on LinkedIn about swimming, because I do believe that being those sports that actually brings a bit of that competitive edge as well in you.
Yeah,
so I think it's very, very good for anyone, to be part of any given sport, be a team or solitary sport, right?
Yeah, and in terms of that headspace, like people say, what do you do to relax? It's just the swimming piece, you know, like I don't typically like exercise at all, other than swimming. You know, people talk about, going to the gym. And for me, the only thing I've ever loved is swimming. Like it doesn't, so it's but being able to kind of take an hour in the morning, and it's quite meditative, like, and then by the time I'm at the office, I'm ready to go. And I do forget, like I try and be cognizant for the team that every day I'm out pitching and meeting, and like even if I'm not raising money and I'm just chatting to other startups and I'm meeting mothers and I'm meeting women, and they love this product so much. Like they're saying, oh my God, I would have done anything to get my hands on this product with my first baby, or, they're just floored, and then the younger women are like, how does this product not exist already? They're just so used to having data at their fingertips. And I'm getting this positive feedback all the time from the market, like from women who just want to tell me about their experience, and, they just love Coro. And I have to remember to bring that back to the team, because when they're there solving the really hard problems, like the really deep core technology, this is deep tech. I have to remember just to remind them, so if an investor sends a nice email saying, look, well done, or they'll ring to say, look, this is amazing, and you've hit your next milestone, I'll try and put them on speakerphone. I like the team to hear, because, I do feel they're not getting that positive feedback that I get pretty much on a daily basis. So, but then on the flip side, yes, it's lonely, but certainly for me, there's a core group of founders that I've met along the way. Yeah, and they are different to my lifelong friends, but they really get it. And there's a gang of us, and we kind of meet for coffee or drinks, and we all share information. And you really realize that it doesn't matter what LinkedIn says, like this is not easy for anyone.
Yes, and I think that's important to have that, that group of founders that are honest, and then you guys can share. There's that safe environment. You're like, okay, actually, this is burning down right now.
Yeah, what do I do?
What do I do? On that journey, Rosanne, because it's interesting, like you mentioned that on that journey, what would be aha moments of an entrepreneurial journey do you be in now, right? That you didn't expect going in, and you're like, oh, and then all of a sudden it clicked, and you were not expecting it.
You see, I don't know, are we just really boring? But we've always had a very particular path, and we try not to deviate from the plan. I think, let me see, or it just clicked. I think maybe for me on the commercial side, on the looking to launch next year, the big sea change from day one was the business model, going from traditional brick and mortar into a direct consumer model, because I had to do a whole look at that whole new world and look at how that can be executed successfully. So, but other than that, like the core product, the technology, we were always solving one problem: how much milk is the baby getting? Like that's it. What's nice along the way is that now that we can measure milk flow accurately, it's the buy-in and the partnerships that the medical and academic community want to do for us. So if you can imagine, we've got Coro selling to mothers here, and women hopefully reaching longer in their own breastfeeding journey as long as they want to, because they now have accurate, precise information. And then on the other hand, we have the data that Coro can be used in a lot of clinical studies and a lot of clinical trials. So, for example, they can look at all of the external factors that impact breastfeeding for the very first time. So does a mother's BMI impact her milk supply? If a mother's on diabetes medication, does that impact her breast milk supply? So for the first time in the world, all of these researchers, medical researchers around the globe, can use Coro to get this data that they have never been able to capture before.
Yes.
So in terms of like Coro being used in all of these health studies that will hopefully go on to inform breast milk and breastfeeding policy guidelines, and all of the other areas of health that breastfeeding can impact, that's really exciting. And that's really Helen's core piece, being the chief research officer. So we're so lucky we have her there dealing with the clinicians and dealing with the researchers globally. So there is a lot of activity in this space. So, and that's really another kind of facet for the investor to understand. It's not just the women at home; it's the other larger piece at that kind of medical level and that medical data level.
The research, because there's so much you guys are actually unlocking from a data perspective, and I think there's a data business as well on the back of this as well, Rosanne. I think we talked about it, and that subscription model, who knows where it could end, right, on the back end. So what are some KPIs? Because you mentioned when you just even focused on that 13% of women being able to reach the 6 months, and trying to see how you move the needle there is already a mission on itself, right? What are some key KPIs that you guys are looking at from a mission statement perspective, like to drive?
Well, what I know from looking at the rates in every country in Europe, if you just take Europe for example, is that initiation rates of breastfeeding in hospitals is really high, like 80%, 90% in some countries. So women are showing that they have the intent that they are at least trying and they want to breastfeed. And then you look at that drop off, and with all the supports in the world, with traditional supports, at the 6-month mark, there's very little difference between the countries that have huge amounts of traditional support and countries that don't. So it really comes down to that core issue, concern regarding low supply. So these women actually have already chosen to breastfeed. So that's like Coro is not for every mother. If a mother is breastfeeding naturally and her baby's gaining weight and she's happy, this is not a product for her. There is important microbiome on the skin-to-skin contact, so natural breastfeeding is best. We really are targeting the mothers who've already chosen to breastfeed and they're about to stop because of this uncertainty. They're about to stop. So, and that's where so that's our key audience, I guess. And I guess what we'll see hopefully very quickly in the first couple of years is that women who use Coro, do those rates go up? So it's really, if the numbers are going to be quite clear if it works or not, and in terms of those kind of studies around women who breastfeed using traditional support versus women who use Coro and have access to data and they can see it's working. And do they last longer in the journey? So that KPI, I guess, is pretty clear. And yeah, I mean, for us now, it feels like, the 6 years of R&D is now complete with the technical validation we received through the clinical trial. And now we are raising this money for production, which is I call phase 2. And then phase 3 is launch next year. So for us, production is tricky. It's a very complex product to produce. And now we have to kind of start building that production capacity line. And, I think for a lot of people, they're like, okay, and investors, okay, it's working, it's proven. Now it's in shops or now it's online, it's for sale. And there's a key piece here, again, with hardware, that's very hard.
Supply chain, right?
Supply chain, the production, building up the production line, and then building up the line to produce units that are reliable, quality assured at scale. So you're looking at this geared ramp up. It's like, 100 units, 1,000 units, 2,000 units. And, it's like the mythical man hours. That just takes time. People say raise more money and fix it quicker. It really doesn't work like that in terms of production, particularly for this type of product. So there is kind of an education piece to the investors that, look, we've now solved this problem. Now let's solve the production and scale, getting this ramped up, and then we launch. And then the next thing is then the sales and marketing. So it's a very phased approach. I mean, it's always been a clear pathway for us. So yeah, now it's execution now, I guess.
I like them. You have to be phased. You have to be like focused at each stage, right? And seeing the moving from one stage to another is a huge validation and a huge reward. Rosanne, you mentioned something there, baby tech, right? Because I always think I'll put you guys in the health tech in a way, brother, and deep tech, right? So tell us a bit about that industry, because Rosanne, you've been in this industry now for over 6 years, right? What have you seen in that industry? How has it grown? We can talk from a European context. You can talk from a global context, but you're in the US as well a lot, right? Tell us how this industry is evolving.
So really quickly, actually, and a lot of it does come down to sensors. So typically, so baby tech is a real American expression. Like people do put us into med tech, but we're consumer, we're femtech because it's a product for women solving a women's problem. So we straddle a lot of these areas. So I've been around a long time, like in this area. So I think what I could see is venture a lot, like early days, it was all about fertility tracking. Like that seemed to be like in the software space. And that's kind of moved on now. There are more companies in femtech looking at around the less sexy spaces around menopause and endometriosis, and there's work going on there. But still, again, on hardware, there's not that many products. You have the kind of breast pumps, and there's two, one in the States and one out of the UK, that are kind of very slick, very sophisticated. They took the old pumping technology and they made it more user friendly. And then you've got like heart monitors, like a sock, like that a parent puts on a baby, and they can see. And then there's these mattresses. So when you look at the baby sock, I don't know if I'm allowed to name brands, and then you look at these mattresses that the babies sleep on, and the parents can hear if the baby's heart stops. I mean, a lot of these are kind of like, they're very, they're quite, they're for the very, very much for parents who are worried, I guess, and who want that comfort. And then, but what I'd say the general similarity, it seems to be around the data piece, and about like nowadays, millennials and Gen Zs, they're just used to data. They love it. They they're looking at their calories tracked, their steps, and they're measuring everything, and they just love it. So even if they don't necessarily need this data or are going to change or do anything different, they still want it. They're just used to it. So I think that seems to be, and particularly for us, we were always surprised that we do very little media. Like the only media we ever do is around our fundraise, because when women hear about Coro, we tend to get inundated with calls looking for it. And it's really...
Give it to me now.
Yeah, and like we don't want to disappoint mothers, because they're at a really critical place, where they really want to continue breastfeeding. So they're about to stop, and they ring and they're kind of desperate. They're like, I'll try it. And, if there's no date and it's not in a shop or it's not available. So we try to just stay under the radar, until we have that launch date. But typically what we find is like 40% of our inbound marketing is from the dads or from the partners. So, which was really, really fascinating for us, because what we could see is when the mom is struggling in the middle of the night and she's like concerned and worried or even upset that she doesn't know, and the dad or the partner he's just there on the phone saying, there has to be a product, there has to be something. And they always come across us. And I've gotten, it's always amazing to me, like the amount of men who find Coro, like as well, like it's, and they love the data. So in our user groups on the analytics screen and how much milk the baby's getting, the mothers wanted like a simple export button that they could send the data to their partner, like just so they can show them, because they like to share this information. And it comes from that. They're just a data generation, and they love it.
Now, I think the data piece is going to be really, really immense in this area, particularly because there's not enough data. And then, of course, with the development of AI, the LLMs, you can actually, with small data sets, you can do a lot of forecasting. And when you start pairing all these products, I think it could be very excitable as well. A holistic view of the baby. Who knows where we can actually go with this? Right? I don't want to go too futuristic. I think
you're like all the investors. They, particularly venture as well. They're always like, that's the questions we get asked, Hesus. What else can you fit into the shield, into this current, form? Moms would say to us, look, I've had a cup of coffee. Could you tell me if there's caffeine in my breast milk? Or, these are the type of things people are thinking about in the future. And it's really that miniaturization of technology that's allowed us to get to this point. And will it continue? Like of course it'll continue. So, but we have to, volume is the key. That's the key at the moment.
And Rosanne, you mentioned something there. The industry talks a lot about it, right? They're very femtech, let's say femtech is a movement, baby tech, right? There are not a lot of female founders being, funded from venture capital perspective, because most of the time it's like men solving men problems, right? in a way, right? What are you seeing in that space? Do you see now that actually there are a lot of VCs that maybe don't understand the problem that well, as in like women problems I'm in, right? But they're still investing and taking the bets because we need to move the area, right? Or you're seeing more female founders being developed and really coming into the industry and saying, actually, we can go big with these ideas that we have and we can solve these problems.
Yeah, look, I have to say that I don't follow the stats that carefully, because I'm just so core on my own business. My head is down. And to be clear, we've never raised with venture. So all of our funding to date has been private investors. But it's not to say I haven't met with venture firms. So I would say, from talking to other female founders in my network, I'm not sure if I'm not sure if the figure is very clear of how much money is going into femtech. I think they're all talking about it, and I think they know it's a hot topic area and they want to be seen to be doing the right thing. But really, until you have really clear transparency on the figures, like, my background, I'm like, follow the money.
Yes,
like,
me too.
Like,
show me the number, show me the money, right?
Yeah, if you follow the money, you're going to get your answer as
exactly,
are they being funded or not? Yeah. Now, like, it was never our experience. Like, we've always been able to finance our project and to fund it. So I can't say, I certainly have never felt that we were turned down money because Helen and I are female founders. And I certainly don't feel that our product was ever turned down money because it was for breastfeeding mothers. Because again, like, look, the people are looking at the size of the problem, and they're looking at that kind of defensibility around the technology. Like, this is a tech product, so it was never our experience. So I can't really speak to it, but everyone's complaining about the lack of money out there at the moment. And it's not just females. I was down with Cork Bic and their entrepreneur experience last weekend, and everyone is finding it hard to raise. And all these are men, women, it's just a very tough landscape at the moment. I was over in Tokyo at FemFest last year, which was the most fascinating conference I've ever been at, or exhibition. It was the world's first femtech hardware exhibition. So this was just for companies that were solving problems in the femtech space, but you had to be a hardware product. And we were invited over, and it was fascinating. They had 200 different products there just in this space, all hardware. And they had a stand. So there was so menstrual cycle, kind of all these type of products. Then they had baby, then they had and postpartum, then they had menopause, and then sexual health and wellness. So the 200 products were divided out. Like, it was an incredible conference and exhibition. But they had started 3 years earlier, and I think I'm correct in saying that when they started 3 years ago, there were 17 products.
There you
go. And 3 years later, there's like 200. And the size of this exhibition conference was incredible. Like, there was about 15 international CEOs from the States and UK and myself. And that was a real sign to me that there is definitely a lot of growth in that space, in the hardware space. But as I said, for the numbers, I think venture, I think the government, like, we just need to see how much is being funded in what industry.
I love that story, Rosanne. This conversation was going to be brilliant. Like, even this story about 17 to 200, I think is very, very enlightening and it's very promising, right? And with this, I want to segue into it, the opportunity for Ireland and Europe. Where do you see it? Because Asia, of course, that story around Tokyo, and of course they close the supply chain, so there's some motivations there. Okay, let's get the best products, plug it into our ecosystem. But what's the opportunity? I know you mentioned the data, right? What other opportunities do you see from Ireland, EU perspective around this area of baby tech, femtech, deep tech, whatever, health tech, whatever area there?
Like, the opportunity is huge because I think, like you said earlier, there's so many problems that haven't been solved for women. So like, there's just an opportunity there to start solving them. And I think what you're looking at is like your key customer, the size of the problem in each market. And then you've got would the mother buy it? And I think what all of the research is showing is that women obviously earn now this, nearly equally to men, their expendable income, and how they spend on health. I think they spend a lot more on their health, and how they manage their health is totally different to male consumers. So like, at every angle that you look at, the size of all of the problems and opportunities that could be solved, and the potential for customers in that space in this market is enormous. But I do think now, as technology progresses, it's more about like not good products, like products that are like sophisticated, like obviously safe is like but more that they're really adding some value. Because I think what you look at in particularly in baby and particularly in femtech, there can be a lot of gimmicks out there for women and not proven. And I think there's a real startups are forced to go fast. You're forced to go fast by your investor, by the VC, and because of this cash run rate, and that you're always facing every day, that hurdle. And I think it's to try to kind of start the business with the quality in mind. This needs to be quality, this needs to have quality output, and it needs to be solving a real problem. So there's hundreds of apps that will like look at time, how long you're breastfeeding, your baby has been on the breast for. Whereas, you could just use your watch for that, or stop clock. I think people are inundated with lots of solutions to maybe problems that aren't really there. So I would always say to startups, are you really solving a problem? And are you solving a problem that people will pay for? Because again, I'm sure anybody else that you've interviewed will say, we often meet people solving a problem. You're like, oh, that's cool. I'd like that on my phone, but I would expect it for free. I'd download it, or I'd expect it as a feature of something else. So it's like, really ask yourself, is this a problem that is worth solving, and is it critically felt? And then, is it something that people will pay for? Will customer pay for this? And if you ask that at the very beginning, and you do that market research early on, I think you'll get to your answer if the market opportunity is there. But yeah, look, this space is on fire at the moment. But like that, the funding landscape at the moment is quite challenging and dire, that I just wonder would a lot of these startups even get out of the blocks? Because when we were raising our seed in 2017, there was a lot of money in the system. There was a lot of investor sentiment was very ambitious, and at the moment it is not. It is really, really challenging out there. And I think there's another couple of years left in this very tough space.
No, I appreciate that insight, Rosanne, because one of even the frameworks, I love you shared the framework there with us, because I'm a big fan of frameworks, maybe still consultant in it, right? Because you have to start with the problem and then see, will they actually, is there a solution for this problem, or will people pay for this particular problem? Outside of Coro, right? I couldn't let you go without asking this question, because I've been looking at this area, and I'm very excited about area too, Rosanne. I think there's a lot of innovations to be had in this area, right? Okay, one of them I've been looking at deeply is genetic editing, right? You can actually pick your baby. Yeah, it's very interesting, right? You can pick the color of your baby's eyes, all that kind of stuff. You can actually, change the baby in a way, right? And yeah, but that's a bit further out in a way, right? But what have you seen, right? Rosanne, you say, oh, that's pretty cool. I never thought about that, because you go to all these places, right? You see these 200 products. Are there some 2 or 3 products you can share with us? You say, oh, I didn't expect that to exist. This is quite surprising.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm like, I don't know if it's a CEO or founder thing, but every time I go to something, I just think our product's the best. And that's where the total lack of modesty comes in. Look, I'm a non-scientist, non-engineer. So as in my background, so even when we went over to accept our grant funding by the European Commission, I was in a room with the other recipients of that cohort, maybe 70 other companies. And these were in the space of climate, nuclear, nanoscience. I honestly did not understand most of everything they were saying or the problems they were solving. It's very unusual that I don't have that kind of science background, but I was over there to accept the funding. And so in terms of what's really exciting that I saw, there's a lot of some work. There's a company called Juno Bio out of London, a CEO I met at that FemFest conference. Hannah was her name, and she was doing a lot of work in the vaginal microbiome. That's a big space right now. So women constantly suffering with thrush infections or other yeast infections, and being able to test at home and send that sample off and get their diagnosis without leaving their house. And there does seem to be a huge amount of work around that vaginal microbiome and what it tells you about the overall health of the woman, how that might be impacting her fertility potentially, and as well the same around the menstrual cycle piece as well, around menstrual, being able to test that blood for things like endometriosis that previously you needed excision surgery to be diagnosed. So, they were kind of describing that every menstrual cycle is like a live blood tissue sample, and it's just being ditched, So look, I know nothing about the area. These were just kind of other products that were being, we're speaking about. Juno Bio certainly is live and has labs and is doing great work. But I think, we're really, like you said, it's getting down to we're really getting into the science piece of it now. And these science potentially these science products and solution are going to be mass consumer available to the mass direct to consumer market. So I think it's very interesting. I can't say I know a lot about it. As I said, I'm always like out there, and I can't see past Coro.
I'd say, Rosanne, Coro does look like an Apple product, right? So beautifully designed, beautiful aesthetically, right? You guys did an incredible job there. Rosanne, I knew this was going to be a fantastic conversation, but before I let you go, where can people find you? Do you hang out on LinkedIn? Do you hang out? Where do you hang out? Is there a handle? Is there an announcement you want to put out there as well, right? Feel free to, drop it here for the guys.
Yeah, great. Look, I'm hanging out on LinkedIn, and corobaby.com is the website. It's obviously, the product will be for sale on it next year. But look, we'll have an announcement in the coming weeks, and I'm sure you'll see it in the newspapers. I won't be modest. So I can't be accused of that. So yeah, look, we try and just go on the usual platforms, Facebook, LinkedIn. But yeah, so I think people have probably heard about us by now, and they're probably sick of hearing about it. But yeah, we're in for a new stage of our journey, and it's really exciting.
Appreciate it again, Rosanne. It has been absolutely brilliant. This is the pod.